Okay, so now we're going to do a little review of the chapter 3 material. I know you may have been watching other sessions I've done, but I thought I would just go ahead and do a review for each little chapter again. Okay, so chapter 3. All right, so chapter 3 was graphing lines and slope. Okay, so problem like 25, you were given an equation and they specified what they wanted you to plug in for your x or your y. My pen, like I said, is not working real well. Let me try that again so I don't have so many breaks. To write slower. All right, so the x they want to know what the y is when x is 0 or -3, and then what is x when y is -31. All right, so the way you approach ones like this is you wind up taking your equation and plugging in the number they gave you for the variable that it was under. So -3 was an x, so you're going to plug that in right here for the x, and then just work this out. So this would turn out to be 27 minus 22, which turns out to be 5. So if you put in a -3, you get 5. Then you do the same for the next one. Where the x is, instead of a -3, you're going to put a 0, and then you're going to work that out. So that's going to turn out to be 0 minus 22, which is -22. And that's what should happen because we know more now than we did when we first did that. That particular -22 was going to be the b value because this happened to be in mx plus b form. All right, now the harder thing to do is the last one because in place of the y, you've got to put 31. So over here, you're putting -31. And that makes it a chapter 2 problem where you've got to work on solving for the x. Okay, so you might find it helpful to rearrange the two sides so that the x is by itself. And then you work on solving that. So you add the 22 to both sides. When you do, that's going to become a -9. This is going to become a -9x. And then the -9 is multiplied by x, so we'll divide by -9. Okay, so we wind up with x equaling 1 on this one. So when the y was -31, the x had to be 1. And then remember what these really are then. If you had to do anything more like graph, these would be ordered pairs that you could plot in a coordinate plane, etc. But that's all you did on 25, okay? All right, so then you had to do some graphing. All right, I'm going to pull up a new whiteboard because I didn't realize I was working on one that's already filled in. So I'm going to create a new one if it lets me. So let me move over here, create a new one. So we're starting fresh. Okay. All right, so then continuing with the graphing. How I graph depends. So if I've got them when they're in slope-intercept form, if they're like y equals mx plus b, I can either use a table or I can use the fact that m is 3 and b is -6 and go from there. Okay. If I have a problem like 24, this was 27, 27 has the ax plus by equals c format. That's the standard form. Okay, and so that one, if I'm given a problem that's in that form, like this one was, then I might just use my chart and maybe plug in a 0 to get the intercepts. And then one more graphing example that it's worth mentioning is what do you do when you have the special type where you only see one variable? Okay. All right, so let's look at all of these. Let's do these rather quickly because we're not learning this the first time. All right, so if I have one like this, I personally would wind up just using the slope and the intercept, and so should you since you've learned that method. It's the quickest way to do this one. Okay, so this is where you begin. This is how you move. It's helpful to have the slope as a fraction so you can think rise over run. So it's up 3, right 1. But you begin at the -6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Begin at the -6 and then go up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1. I usually do it a couple times so that I can get a nice graph. All right, if you prefer, you can just plug in like a 0 for x and then get -6, or plug a 1 in for x and 3 minus 6 would be -3. You'd get the same end result, okay? Right now with 27, I probably would not try to solve for the y to get it in mx plus b form. I would just use intercepts. This is using intercepts. Whenever they use that term, that means we're looking for the place where it crosses the x and the y axis. That's what these zeros do. Okay, so you would plug in a 0 for x one time and then figure that, oops, not a question mark there. Figure that out. And then you'd put in a 0 for the y on this one and figure that one out. So if I put a 0 in for the x, see this would be gone, and see how I'd have to get rid of that -24, and that would wind up giving me a -1 right there. But if I put a 0 on this side, that's gone, and I'd have to divide by 4, and that would equal 6. And then these 2 points, people will plot those incorrectly a lot of times, so you do need to be careful when you're working problems like that. You don't really need 3 points if you're careful. 0, -1 is down here, not here. That would be incorrect. And then 6, 0. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right, and then stay there. So there is the line, okay? All right, and then when you're doing one like y = 7, or if you're doing one like x = 4, what I recommend that you do is think about what it's saying. The y's are 7 all the time. So that means no matter what you do left or right, you're always going to jump up to wherever 7 is, no matter what. So that's going to give you a line that's this way. That's always going to be true. If it's a y equal a number, it's going to be horizontal, okay? By the way, if they wanted us to do slope, the slope would be 0 on that, okay? All right, so I think I'll stop the video. Well, maybe I'll do a little bit more. I like to keep my videos kind of short. Let's do a little bit with slope, okay? You have to be able to do a slope from a graph, slope from 2 points, and then find a slope from an equation, okay? So like if you're given the graph, make use of it. The picture they gave you had a point that looked like it was down here at -4 and then over here at 2. And really the best thing you can do is just count. Okay, do rise over run to get your slope. So think about how you go up 4, that's +4, to the right 2, that's +2, and 4 divided by 2 would equal 2. So m equals 2, and you're done. Okay. Now, when they give you 2 points, the main thing you got to watch out about, a lot of you got really good with this, but you need to watch out about your positives and negatives. All right, so the formula you would be thinking about here is the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you need to make a little summary page that has all these key things on them. All right, and then when you're doing that problem, you'd plug the y's in here. It doesn't matter which point you consider the first point. So say you thought about doing 4 minus 2. You took the y coordinates 4 and you subtracted the 2. Then when you come back down here to do your x's, make sure you start with that second point and do 8. But it's not -5. That would be incorrect. It's minus -5. These are part of the formula. And then the 5, that coordinate happened to be negative. So then you just simplify. This would be 2. This would be 13. So m would equal 2 over 13. Okay, 2/13. All right, and then if you're trying to identify what the slope is from an equation, this is 32. Okay, this was 31. No, this was 30. Okay, and this was number 29. If you're trying to do the slope from an equation, what you do is you rearrange it so that y is by itself to get it in the form. You try to rearrange it so it looks like y equals some number times x plus b, and then that's your answer. Okay, so these were all asking for slope. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to subtract the 2x from both sides. Okay, that gives me, or leaves me, a negative 3y equals, then on the right-hand side, those are not like terms. That would be negative 2x minus 8. Then I got to get rid of the negative 3, so I'm going to divide by that. Go ahead and distribute it into both. This would just be y equals positive 2/3 x plus 8/3, since they're negative divided by a negative. All right, and then that tells me my slope is positive 2/3. And that's all you needed to do on that one. Okay. All right, and then when you had the problem like on 31 where you had 2 points, on that one, what happens is when you go to plug things in, it would be 1 minus 1, regardless of whether you did 2 minus negative 2 or negative 2 minus 2. Okay, either way, you're getting a 0, but it's on top. You might get 0 over negative 4, you might get 0 over 4, but either way, m exists and equals 0. Okay, that's happening because if you think about these points, 2, 1 and 2, negative 1 would line up horizontally. This is the actual line, and you can walk along it, so the slope would be 0. Okay, all right, so that's talking just slope. And then there was a question about writing equations of lines. This might be a good place to stop. I'll do one more video on that unit in a minute.